Hello everybody, my name is Ian Ellis. I'm the SCG Madison winner. Just started posting online a couple weeks before Madison and hadn't done a deck tech. This is my Dark Horizons slash junk list. It is not rock. It is not rock. If you need proof of that, I'll put a link in the description. This deck is based primarily around being able to manipulate your deck into whatever it needs to be. You've got a couple different packages, being the Green Sun Zenith package, the Stoneforge Mystic package, the land mana base for the Knight of the Reliquary. Your draw card engines being things that allow you to basically, if you want, cantrip them into other things. By cantrip them, I just mean that you can pull an extra card off of them, and in some cases more than one per use. To start off, we have the 3 Mox Diamonds, which are actually for color fixing. The boost in mana on the first turn is more than welcome, but these are actually intended to fix color. There's a lot of different things in the deck. You need double black, you need green white, you need green black, all on certain turns. Like, you need all of these things as they come up. And granted, there isn't anything outside of Liliana that costs more than one of its color in the main or the board, unless you're going to count this, but that's, you can use your life for that, so no counting that. So the Moxes help to regulate that. Moving on, we have Sensei's Divining Top. This is not a blue deck, so there's no filtration, pretty much. So to get rid of that problem, because top decking is the worst thing that you can actually have in Legacy when you get into a top deck war, and to have to actually top deck against a deck is worse than having to just kind of draw and be like, okay, well, I can manipulate what I'm drawing. So you have 2 tops for that. The Simple Inquisition, yeah, I know I said simple. The Single Inquisition is meant specifically for having to deal with decks that play burn. The deck does have a problem with dealing with too much burn that goes to the face, too much damage to the face, things like that. And the Inquisition helps to steal cards without losing you life, whereas the Thoughtseize can take anything. So you can get your forces and your, if people play it again, natural orders and things like that off of the Thoughtseizes, where you have 3, and 1 Inquisition can get the other blue card in hand, so you can make the force into a hymn of your choice if need be. Next up, we have Swords, prime removal spell for the format. Kills everything, leaves nothing. The only thing that it doesn't stop are things with hexproof or shroud. So in the format right now that I can think of offhand, that's Thrun and Nimble Mongoose. More so Mongoose than Thrun is. Rug Delver's been considered the best deck in the format, so everybody runs it. Singleton Bird of Paradise has the same place as the Mox, where it's just kind of a color fixer. Green is your primary color that you're trying to hint on, but white is actually the dominant color. There are more things with a white cost in them than a green cost or even a black cost. And it's unfortunate, but it's true. Moving on, we have Termaglyph, which has fallen out of favor recently, but with the reinclusion of Canadian Thresh or Rug Delver, whichever one you want to call it, you need something that you can tutor for that's a 2-drop that you can drop and kind of pause the game for them. Slowing them down makes it worse for them. The longer that you can go into the game, the worse their deck gets. Next up, we have Stoneforge Mystic and its packages of Batterskull and Jit. Originally, there was Fire Ice in this list. Unfortunately, Fire and Ice is not as useful as it once was. Now, the removal aspect of it, you need the Jit. Unfortunately, that also means that your bird can't just swing when it's the only thing out there and you have the other equipment hooked up to it. But you have to give and take where you can. You can't get everything you want. Batterskull and Jit, as far as being the only 2 tutor targets, they accomplish pretty much everything you need. Jit is the best creature control card for any deck having to fight aggro, and that's hands down. And Batterskull is a great card against control. Being a creature with lifelink and vigilance in itself also gives a game against aggro, but typically I'll be going for the Jit against aggro. Next up, we have Scavenging Ooze. A lot of Legacy is based off of resources, and those resources being your hand, graveyard, and battlefield. Oh god, I can't believe I said battlefield. So you need to be able to operate and fight in all 3 zones. Scavenging Ooze accomplishes that for the graveyard. The base of the deck does it for hand and play, so that's where that comes in. Pride Mage, there's a lot of equipment in the format. There's a lot of different artifacts and enchantments, and sometimes, I mean, you can even get lucky and catch a bad test player who plays his LED first, and then he tries to cast another spell, and you go for it with the Pride Mage. Then they have the choice between the 3 mana or their hand. Next up, we have Dark Confidant, who is, I don't know if I need to explain this. Bob draws cards. Yeah, you lose life, but you have things to manipulate the top of your library so you can kind of fight that. You also have life gain, which also helps to deal with that. Next up, Sylvan Library is, again, it was originally the 3rd top, but I found that top tends to be a little bit mana intensive, so I wanted to kind of switch that up, and Library accomplishes a lot of the same things. You lose the ability to be able to fetch, look, fetch, look, fetch, look, but you do get the ability to go, oh, I want 2 cards. I'll keep those. It also doesn't have a mana requirement, so if you play this on 1 or 2, those being turns, you can use them the next turn and right away. Next, we have, I'm going to go ahead and go with the Maelstrom Pulse. The reason there's Maelstrom Pulses over Vindicate is because you tend not to go after mana bases anymore. Because Legacy's become a lot more focused on it, it's a lot bigger of a format, there's a lot more people working on it, looking at it, tuning for it. Mana bases have become more stable. Because of that, aiming at mana bases is not as useful. Canadian Thresh originally only ran 18 lands. It was very easy to use 1 Wasteland or 1 Vindicate and they would be out of the game. Now they're running 20 lands and it's becoming a little bit more difficult. So you have the Pulse. On top of that, with there being no deeds in this deck, you run into the problem of having to kill multiple things with the same name. So zombie tokens, goblin tokens, multiple Mother of Ruins. It's happened. Trust me, it's fun. So that's why Deed is in there. Next up, Liliana the Veil. By far and away the heart and soul. If she's on board and you can protect her, you will win the game. 100%, hands down, no questions asked. Her ultimate is an end-all in Legacy. There is no deck in the format that can stand against her ultimate once it's actually gone off. And that should hold true in Standard and Limited as well. It's kind of like an Armageddon where you're pretty much screwed. Like, you know what's going to happen. They don't. The only difference being, in this case, they do, and they're really, really hoping that you screw up the piles, and that's the only way that it comes back to that. Knight of the Reliquary is the best creature in Legacy right now, and I'm going to say that just hands down. The only thing that it has a requirement on is you have to be able to support it with your mana base, so keep that in mind. Batterskull went over. Green Sun's Edith is just a tutor selection. It's a virtual copy of any green creature in here. The thing that you have to remember is that even though this copy is virtual, it pulls the actual copy out. So I do only have 1 bird, but I can operate as though I had 3. I do only have 1 Pride Mage, but I can operate as though I had 3. The only thing is that once I use that Pride Mage, I cannot operate as though I have it anymore. Alright, I'll go through lands. These are all of your basic, or your typical mana producing lands that are just mana producers. You have 1 of each basic because I hate Blood Moon, I hate Wasteland, I play around them religiously, I upset people who play Price of Progress on a regular basis. 2 Bayous. Even though white is your secondary color that you need the most mana of, you have 2 Bayous and 1 Savannah, and the reason for that is you have 2 Canopies. Originally this was 2 and 3. Canopy just is a Savannah that you lose a life but have the ability to draw a card later, and that ability is actually much more useful than being able to tutor out another land. You have 7, I'm sorry, I can't count today. You have 7 different lands that are just easily tutorable with any fetch land, in addition to the Dryad Arbor. So, I mean, there's enough lands that you should be able to run out of fetch lands before you run out of lands in deck. Wasteland, obvious inclusion. Even though it's a 3-color deck, you have the ability to fix your mana due to Diamond and Bird. So you're allowed to play multiple Wastelands. There would be 4, but the 4th Wasteland is a Maze of Ith, which allows for pseudo-vigilance for any creature if you're on the aggression, or if you're the aggressor, or to stop any attacker. Dryad Arbor is a Green Sun Zenith target at 0, also a ramp spell, so your Zeniths can get you up to 3 as fast as possible. Bojuka Bog, I play mine in the main because there's no point not to. The deck can operate with coming into play tap lands, and having 2 of them, one of them being tutorable via Green Sun, and both of them being tutorable via Night, is not going to kill you. So that essentially makes 3 lands that you have of your 23 that come into play and are not usable for mana on the turn they come into play. Caracas has a lot of legendary permanents. I don't think I need to explain more than that. 7 fetches. You have 3 of the 2 dominant colors, or of the green fetch, which is the dominant color, and 1 of the middle fetch, which is white black, because they are the offset colors. And that should take care of the main deck. Moving on to the sideboard, I'm going to go from right to left. We have Uvenwald Tracker, new inclusion added just before the Madison tournament. Was added originally to just fight Mother of Ruins. Since then, I found that she's very good, or the tracker is very good. It is a guy in that picture, I think. Might be a woman. But the tracker is very good at killing Mother of Ruins. Is very good against killing aggro. If you get a creature down that's bigger than their creatures, than any of their creatures, then you just start picking off creatures with that one, and it makes it so that you can allow yourself to get into that board stall position and still be gaining advantage. You're kind of keeping them back. 2 timely reinforcements. Honestly, these could be renewed faiths so far. It wouldn't make too much of a difference. Typically, I'm casting them and gaining the life. I've gotten the tokens a couple times. It's come into play a couple times, but you're typically just going for the life. Thalia has replaced Aethersworn Canonist as my combo hate main inclusion, simply because Canonist, people operate on each turn anyway in combo decks. They operate on their turn, they operate on your turn, they operate on theirs, yours, and then they go off and win. So Canonist isn't as helpful. What Canonist did do was help out where Thalia doesn't, and that's against decks like Elves, where suddenly, hey, look, they're just going off with the Thalia on play because they don't care about it. Whereas with Canonist, they get 1 spell per turn, and that's it. So that's that part. Surgical Extraction is your graveyard hate card. Originally Leyline of the Void, then into 2 Surgical Extractions, and now up to 3. The changes were because I believe that you should be having a 0-costed graveyard removal spell. When it was Leylines, it was during the Reanimator heyday, and it was a lot harder for them to deal with a Leyline in play while I'm trying to play Knight of the Reliquary and discard and things like that. It's a lot more difficult for them to get operational while I'm attacking their hand, while I can fight their graveyard at the same time, like as a whole, not even just limiting things. So nowadays, with Reanimator being kind of a back burner deck and Dredge taking the front line, I had switched over to 2 Surgical Extractions. The main deck is strong enough to fight Dredge. Your only problem being if they go off on turn 0 with the LED versions, then you're just kind of SOL. You have to hope that they don't get the Zealot, that they're just dropping zombies in, and that you can get a fast pulse out. But now with Faceless Looting, we've upped this number to 3. That has been sufficient so far. I'm going to skip over this Life from the Loam for right now. It's actually a filler card. During the tournament, it was a Pernicious Deed, if you're wondering. Which one do I think is better? I'm still up in the air. I haven't actually had a chance to board this in. Every time I think about it, it just doesn't happen. Next up, then, we have the Inquisition of Kozilek. Adds on as a 5th removal spell for the hand, 5th discard, and is mainly used against combo decks, just because you want to be able to stop them from either going off or manipulating the top of their library as much as possible. If you can get the win condition, so like against High Tide, if you can get the High Tide and they didn't board one out, it's very difficult for them to win with islands producing 1 mana. So next up, Gaddock Teague, another combo hate card, also comes in against some control decks because Force of Will costs 5, Jace costs 4, Elspeth costs 4. I do apologize, I have a little bit of a cold right now, so you're just going to have to deal with that one. And that's the main part of where Gaddock Teague comes into play. He's very good at fighting big costed cards, also stops EE and repeal. So just something to think about. Choke, I'll come back to Dismember, is a blue hate card. Obviously, if you see your opponent playing a lot of islands, you like to choke them. And no, you can't get DQ'd for choking your opponent with this card. Don't do it in the physical form. You might get DQ'd for that when they may call the cops. Dismember, this slot is highly debated. I am waiting for a 1-drop removal spell that is not Path because I do not like to ramp my opponents, that can kill as much of the format as possible. Unfortunately, this can't kill most of the Reanimator targets. It does kill Jin Jitaxis, which is, out of all of Jin's abilities, the worst one is him actually just mind twisting you. So that's where that sits. If I get a 1-drop removal spell that doesn't suck up 8 of my life for killing a bigger creature, looking at you, Vendetta, then I will definitely replace this. It has been very handy as far as getting me out of Magus to the Moons, but due to the 7 different spells or 7 different land producers, mana producers that can get around Magus, that hasn't been too much of an issue so far. And that is the deck. I'm going to give you guys a couple videos here. I'm going to try and do them bi-weekly. I'm a little late on this week. There's the last month's worth in there. The only thing that I'm stalling for is I'm actually thinking about putting the deed in here in this slot and giving you guys a couple games as just the Madison list, or whether or not I want to update, cut a timely, cut this for 2 Elspeths and some other things. But we will see how things go, and I hope to see you all again.